Temps that all food handlers should know. These are temperatures that you should know off the back of your hand, just like this, boom. Things that you should, that should be second nature for you if you're working in the kitchen, all right? So the first thing is a temperature danger zone. You need to understand that microorganisms do not like cold at all, and they're not crazy about really hot temperatures. Anything above 135, they don't do so well. But the room temperature where we're working and our body temperatures are just right in the sweet spot. And microorganisms will divide and multiply every 20 minutes. So if you have 2, 20 minutes from now you'll have 4, 20 minutes from then you'll have 8, 20 minutes from then you'll have 16, and so on and so on. So you want to reduce the amount of time that food is left, especially potentially hazardous foods are left in the danger zone. They have to, you want to keep them out of this area right here as much as you possibly can, 41 to 135, all right? So first step in this whole process is receiving your food. You have to make sure that when your food is delivered, that it is delivered at the proper temperature. So all the foods that must come in at 41 degrees or below, all right, have to be chicken. Any kind of chicken that you're talking about has to be 41 degrees or below. Any kind of fish, and that's filleted fish. That's not shellfish. That's filleted fish. Pork and beef all must be delivered to your facility below 41 degrees. All dairy products must be below 41 degrees or below, and then anything that's pre-packaged, sort of like sliced deli meats or anything that comes in a cryovac. A lot of food service operations get cryovac things. You have to make sure it is definitely below 41 degrees. Now, there's a couple of things that can be, and as I understand, I emphasize the word can be, 45 degrees or above. Now, when you're taking the temperature of a chicken that comes in, you can easily take your thermometer, put it between 2 packages of chicken and take the temperature. And that applies for fish or any other thing. But when it comes to eggs, you really can't take your thermometer and jab it into one egg and see what the temperature is. So, and the same thing with clams and mussels. How can you tell? Usually clams and mussels should be packed on ice. And if they are packed on ice, you can pretty much guarantee they're below 41 degrees, or 45 degrees. But you can have an infrared thermometer and, take a temperature, a quick reading of the outside, an air temperature. And they can be 45 degrees or lower. And those are the only 2 things. And shellfish can be chopped, and it can also come in at 45 degrees. All right, so now we're going to go to internal cooking temperatures. We know we received it all at the proper temperature. As soon as it's received, you want to put it right into the walk-in cooler or the refrigerator or the freezer, whichever it may be, to make sure that you're holding at the proper temperatures. We talked about the temperature danger zone, so the next thing you're going to do is you're going to, after you've refrigerated it, stored it after it's come in, you're going to handle it for the minimum amount of time in the temperature danger zone. And then once you cook it, you have to make sure it goes to a certain temperature. So all the foods I'm going to talk about right now must go to 165 internal temperature for 15 seconds. That means you put your thermometer in the proper way. You don't take your thermometer and put it in all the way through the thing. You go on an angle so you're in the middle of it. When you're going to take your temperature of your food, let's say you have 3 pans of chicken in the oven, you want to go for the pan that's in the middle of the oven, and you want to make sure you go to the biggest one that's in the middle of the sheet pan, right in the middle of the oven. If you take the one that's closest to you or the one that's closest to the edge, it's going to be, the temperature is going to be a little bit hotter on that edge. Even if it's just a couple of degrees, makes a difference, because if the outside one says it's 65 degrees and the inside one is only at 155 or 158, you're still not at 165. So you want to make sure you get the fattest one in the middle. All right, so poultry, ground poultry, no matter how it's cooked, whether it's sauteed like this one over here is, whether it's roasted like this guy is, or they're fried, doesn't matter. Internal temperature must go to 165 for 15 seconds. All right, internal temperature for the following: stuffed meats. All right, so if you have a stuffed pork chop or if you have a stuffed leg of veal, you have to make sure that the internal temperature goes to 165. 9 times out of 10, you're going to put eggs in that stuff, and you have to make sure those eggs get cooked. 165 also for stuffed seafood, so stuffed clams and stuffed pastas, manicotti, that kind of thing. have to make sure that they all go to 165 internal temperature. And then it says right here, made with TCS, time controlled substance. So if it's something that is a TCS food, that we just went through, the eggs, the dairy, the cheeses, the chickens, all those things, poultry, all those things are potentially hazardous. They're TCS foods. All right, internal temperature that go to 155. Okay, we changed one from 165. Now we're at 155. So ground beef, pork, and things like meatloaf and burgers. So this burger should be served at 155. Now, you're working in a restaurant, you're going to get people are going to come in, they're going to say, I want a rare burger. On your menu, you should have a disclaimer that says, we recommend that all foods be cooked thoroughly. And then if somebody says, hey, I want my burger medium rare, I want my burger rare, and it's not going to go to 155, it's on them at that point. You put a disclaimer on the menu that says, you recommend everything should be cooked to 155 or until it's completely cooked. So meatloaf, also ground beef. Once you take a beef and you grind it up, all the microorganisms that are on the outside are now mixed in. So you have to make sure you go to 155 internal temperature. These also must go to 155. Brined or injected ham. So a lot of ham will come with an injected flavor, give it a smoky flavor, or it'll be brine. This is a brine where you sit and you put it in there and you let it soak. It will add flavor. But all those things must come. A lot of times you'll get a ham in that's already cooked, and all you have to do is reheat it. When you reheat it, you must go to 155 internal temperature for 15 seconds. Now, the following have to go to 145, and I want to emphasize for 4 minutes. All right. So a roasted leg of lamb or roasted rack of lamb. Roasted pork loin. And the reason it's 4 minutes is you'll notice these are all bigger items. And if you put your probe in and you just hold it for 15 seconds, it could be a little misleading because it's such a big item. I went through this the other day where as you're putting it in, it's hotter on the outside than it is on the inside. And if you don't put your probe in the right way, then the internal temperature is not what you're taking. You're taking this temperature right here on the edge. So you have to make sure that your probe goes right in the middle, the fattest part. All right, so that goes for roasted lamb, roasted pork, roast beef. So if you have a top round of beef that you're going to roast off, you got to go to 150 or 145 for 4 minutes. And then roasted veals. The next group is 145 for 15 seconds. So if you have a fillet of fish, it doesn't matter what kind of fish it is. If it's a fillet of fish and you're sauteing it, baking it, roast it, poach it, whatever you want to do with it, everything has to go to 145 internal temperature for 15 seconds. The same applies with, now, so we had the stuffed pork chop, and it even says here, not stuffed. We had the stuffed pork chop before, and that had to go to 165 because it was stuffed. This guy is not stuffed, so he needs to go to 145. Clams on the half shell, or clams that are mixed in with a pasta dish, 145 internal temperature, 15 seconds. Internal temperature for the following foods. So anything commercially pre-made, like a lot of times the people will buy breaded vegetables, breaded calamari, that kind of stuff like that. The French fries, all those things have to go to 135 for 15 seconds. All right, holding hot food. Okay, so now we've cooked everything to the proper temperatures, and we went over all the temperatures. Now we're going to hold our food. So if you have cold food, it needs to be 41 degrees or below. Up here is a no-go, can't do it. Check down here. All your stuff needs to be held at 41 degrees or below. I'll give you a quick story. Back in the day, I was making tuna salad, and we had maybe a cup of mayonnaise in the cooler in the big gallon container. So I had to get a new gallon of mayonnaise, and I got the tuna out of the dry storeroom, and I got the lettuce and the onions, and I cut it all up, and I mixed it all up. And as I'm finishing it up, the health inspector comes in, puts a thermometer in it, and tells me I have to throw it all away because the tuna was at room temperature when I started. Most of the mayonnaise was at room temperature when I started. So when I was mixing it together, it was well above 41 degrees. But I had just taken it all the ingredients out of the dry storeroom. He didn't want to hear any of it. It wasn't cold enough. It had to be thrown away. So the moral of the story is, if you're going to make tuna salad, make sure you refrigerate stuff before you start, and it's got to be below 41. Health department comes in and takes the temperature of something on the line. It is not below 41 degrees. He's going to make you throw it away, unless, even if you can prove that it's only been there for a short period of time, doesn't matter. So the one thing that you can do is, this is a buffet, outdoor buffet. No way you're going to have this stuff under refrigeration. So if you're in the inside, if you're at the hometown buffet and they have everything in a salad bar, everything must be below 41. If you're working in a restaurant and you have a salad station, everything in your salad station, when you open up that lid, better be 41 degrees or below. But if you're doing an outside function, you can hold cold foods without refrigeration, but there's guidelines, right? So it needs to be below 41 when you take it out of the refrigeration. So that means you can't take it, throw it in the back of a truck, drive it for 4 hours, get there, and it's above 41 before the buffet even begins. So when it's put on the table, it needs to be 41 degrees or below. It doesn't exceed 70 degrees outside, or the product doesn't exceed 70 degrees. This runs into an issue sometimes if you're doing an outside catering party. It's 100 degrees outside. The chances of it getting above 70 degrees within that 6 hours are pretty good. So you have to be real careful. Everything has to be labeled specifically. So what time was removed from refrigeration and what time it needs to be thrown out. So there's no question as to how long it's been there and when it needs to go. And it needs to either be sold, served, or thrown out within 6 hours. Right, so that's our cold food. Now our hot food, everything must be above 135. If you're on a hot line and you check the temperature of something at noon and it's above 135, you check it again 2 hours later and it is below 135. At that point, you can take it out, bring it to a boil, and put it back in the thing. You can do corrective action. If that's not the case, and you check the temperature at noon and you don't check it again until 5 p.m., well, at that point, you have to throw it away. You have to check your temperatures at least once every 4 hours. And at that 4-hour mark, if it's under temperature, you need to throw it away. If you catch it within the 4 hours, then you can reheat it and still serve it. The bottom line is you want to make sure everything is held hot above 135. Now, we talked about the buffet a minute ago with the cold stuff. Well, you can do the exact same thing with hot food, but it can only be out for 4 hours. And it was just like the cold food had to be held below 41 before it was put out. This must be 135 or above when it hits the table. It must be labeled what time it hit the table, and so also label what time it needs to be thrown out. And everything needs to be sold, served, or eaten within 4 hours. All right, always have your thermometer and always check your temperatures often. There's only one way to make sure that you're serving everything safely, and that is using the thermometer. Best thing to do is document those temperatures as well. But this way you cover yourself and make sure that you're diligent with your staff and yourself to make sure that you're serving everything at the proper temperatures to reduce the chance of getting somebody sick.